All right, high rollers, another poker night in America is in the books for 3 days at the Seminole Hard Rock Casino. The likes of Sean Deeb, Phil Laak, Jennifer Tilley, Doug Polk, and Frank Casella, the 2010 WSOP Player of the Year, battled it out in a big cash game. And our guest today called all the action. There was lots of it, too. A busy 3 days in the broadcast booth for Jesse Abramowitz, at Jesse Calls Poker on Twitter. He's a poker player, broadcaster, freelance author with Rakeback.com, was an associate producer on the PokerStars Big Game. I love that show. And lately, he's been doing a ton of broadcasting, recently called the final table of the Caribbean Poker Party for Party Poker Live, and now he's with Poker Night in America. Jesse, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being our high roller today.
Hey, Derek. Thanks for having me.
Before we talk about Poker Night in America, I read that you once turned $50 online into $20,000 in 1 week, way back in the day. I mean, what was that like? That's got to be a rush.
Yeah, that's true. I actually did that sophomore year in college. I went to school in Ithaca, New York, where there's a pretty good poker scene. I was in Ithaca the same time as Brian Hastings and those guys, and there was always a lot of home games and such. And I think I was playing on Paradise Poker, perhaps, and I had $50 and flipped it into like 500, and I didn't want to write this paper, and then they had $500 heads ups, and I actually got it all in with like ace queen versus king jack, and he flopped two pair, and then my internet cut out and I had to restart my computer. And when I loaded it back up, I noticed that I had $1,000 in my account instead of zero. So that means I binked to the 10 ball on the river, and then I just started playing $500 heads ups all week.
That's amazing, man. You know, a rush in poker is all relative. It happens in every type of game. Some guys win the main event. Some guys turn $50 into 20 grand. I won a satellite once that sent me to Barcelona. But the rush is real. Is that how you got hooked on the game?
Yeah, I think so. The idea that you could just sit down at your computer and all of a sudden make money come out of thin air was certainly a rush. And I think that the game kind of lends itself to it's easy to get arrogant and think you're a lot better than you are, which is fun.
Okay, Seminole Hard Rock Casino. You had a great 3 days on Twitch. It was a great lineup, big names, a few technical difficulties, but that happens. How would you sum up your experience there in Florida?
I'd say I'm still hurting from it. I've barely recovered. Not a lot of sleep, a lot of alcohol. Those guys are really fun. It was a great lineup. There were times where I felt like I didn't even need to really be in the booth because I just wanted to listen. Like, first and foremost, as a fan, I just wanted to sit there and listen to them talk. And they are some silly guys. And, of course, Jennifer as well. It was a blast, though.
Well, speaking of that, wanting them to talk and to listen to them, it's a fine line, right? It's tough on Twitch because you get all the people, the trolls in the comments, and they're telling you to be quiet. They want to listen as well. So there's a fine line. How do you try to balance that?
Well, typically I just go with my instinct as a poker viewer and fan, and I am that core demographic, I believe. The thing that happened in Florida was that we were actually using borrowed microphones because most of the equipment was in Punta Cana, and we couldn't get it all the way there in time. So it was a little bit of a struggle. As far as the balance goes, if I hear something that piques my interest, then I just like shut the fuck up really quickly.
Well, I thought you guys did a great job. I thought it was very entertaining. You know, the technical difficulties aside, that's not on you. But definitely some interesting table dynamics over the course of 3 days. I didn't watch it all, but I watched a lot of it. There were a few standout moments for me. How about you or standout players? Anything surprise you? Anything stand out?
Yeah, definitely. Firstly, I think Jeremy Kaufman is amazing for television. That guy is fantastic, provides so much action on and off the table. Also, I noticed that Frank Casella is one of the most likable people I've ever met in my life. That guy's always laughing and throwing a drink back. And there were a lot of really funny hands that people will remember from this session. There was a time when Phil Laak got it in with ace king versus two tens on a king 9x board and ran it twice with, I believe, Avi Friedman. Phil decided at the last second to run it twice, and Avi Friedman binked the 10 on the first run out on the turn, and then binked the last sole 10 in the deck on the river on the second run to scoop the pot.
That's amazing. And when something like that happens, it's great for the broadcast. The table just erupts.
Oh, my God, yeah. And then there was another hand where Doug got it in with 3 outs versus Kaufman and then got left hanging with like the most embarrassing high five attempt of all time, which has been clipped out and memed all over the internet already.
Well, you talk about Jeremy Kaufman. He added the final act in that hand that I really liked where Matt Glantz folded the ace-6 and then bought Casella's folded cards, the King Jack of Hearts it turned out to be, went up against Polk, and he nails the flush. Polk folds, but then Jeremy decides that he's going to use his own money to make the call. I mean, that was outstanding.
Yeah, that may have been the weirdest and funniest hand I've ever seen. I'm not sure it totally complies with the gaming laws, but I want to say it was towards the very end of the night. There may have even been a triple straddle, something like 800 or 400. And by the time it got around to Doug in the big blind with 7-8 off, he was the straddler, rather. And knowing Doug, he was always going to bump that up. And I think Glance folded ace-6, and Casella folded behind him. And then Glance said something like, "I bet you folded like such a better hand." And Glance offered him 2K to buy his mucked cards, which were King Jack of Hearts. The table agreed to it, and then the board ran out like deuce 6-6. So I think Glance's original hand would have been trip 6. And there was one heart on the board, so Doug c-bet and Glance defended with 2 overs in the backdoor hearts. And I think the 10 of hearts peeled off on the turn. Doug bet again. And the river was the 8 of hearts, and there's like 23K out there. And now that Doug is actually rivered a pair, second pair, he has showdown value. So instead of going for the bluff, he just checks. And the way that the sizing worked is that Glance had about 19K behind. So whether he hits this flush or not, or pair, he's probably always jamming this in, and he goes all in for 19K, and Doug is in the tank for a long time, and eventually he decides that he would like to fold, but Jeremy Kaufman offers to play the river for him and puts his own money in the pot, and it balloons to 60K, and Glance takes the whole thing, and one of the weirdest hands we've ever seen, given that it came down to 2 decisions between 2 people that had folded prior to the flop.
Yeah, it really was amazing. It was a lot of fun, and I was thinking the same thing. Hey, this doesn't match gaming laws. You're not going to find this in your corner casino in the 1-3 game. Is a hand like that okay to happen in the higher stakes games when all the players are on board with it and it's all agreed to? I mean, they had to discuss it, didn't they?
Well, it's definitely okay in certain states. It may not be promoted directly by this particular venue, but I'm sure that people will tweet that video out and clip that out. But I think that as long as every player in the game agrees to what's going on, then everything is kosher.
It's great to see Jennifer Tilly playing. Phil Laak was there. Some great personalities. I mean, it was a lot of fun. What do you think about Phil Laak and Jennifer Tilly playing this weekend? They're great for the game in my mind.
Yeah, I've always said that Phil Laak was probably my favorite television player. And Jennifer is just an absolute pleasure to have at any table and a true sport. She spent the entire day in the broadcast booth with me on day 2, I believe. And then she popped in during day 3 and just showed up, like brought me booze. It was like fun and playful. And she just obviously loves the game because she doesn't need to play. She legitimately loves it and couldn't be a nicer person.
Well, I'm a big fan of Jennifer Tilly. I've been trying to get her on for a long time. I believe in positive thinking, so every time I retweet something of hers or she comes up and I talk about it on Twitter, I always say future guest. She responds and retweets, but she hasn't been a guest yet, but I feel like one day I'm going to have her on the show, and I can't wait for that. Speaking of Twitter, I want to run down a few of your tweets. I was on your Twitter profile today. You say in one tweet, special prop Sean Deeb for buying many rounds for the Poker Night TV crew here at Hard Rock Holly. You're a real mensch. You also wrote, so Jennifer Tilly shows up for 10 minutes, brings me booze, and calls me a handsome guy and well endowed on stream. And then Jennifer tweeted out, we're magic on the mic. We're about to go live. Jesse is hungover, and I just woke up, so this should be good. Some themes developing there, my man. A, alcohol, and B, a good time. You guys were having fun. It's a great atmosphere, isn't it, when that cash game goes?
Oh, my God, yeah. I mean, we're shooting till 12-ish, and then we've got the delay. And then once you're done shooting, all you want to do is go have a few drinks. So maybe you have a couple scotches or a couple IPAs, and the next thing you know, it's 4 in the morning, and you have to get up to do the whole thing again. I maybe got carried away in the excitement of the evening, drinking with all the guys, and couldn't say no to a drink or 7. And by the time I woke up in the morning, I was like, oh my God, like my head is in a vice, my brain isn't functioning. But maybe that's okay because I'm just being truthful to how these things kind of go. That was like an absolute blast, and there's no other job that you could have where you can be super hungover and half dead and still kind of get through it. The guys at Poker Night in America truly have something special going on there. They're this organic group of mostly lifelong friends from Fargo. They bust their ass day in and day out on a pretty modest budget, traveling across the country, and they're leaving their wives and their girlfriends and families at home for weeks or months at a time. But they've managed to build this family amongst themselves, and the dynamic there is one that's like many years in the making. And they're all hilarious, both as a group and individually, and have a wide spectrum of interests, and everyone is like super open-minded. When I was on the stream with Tilly, I looked up and Tucker, one of the crew members, was flashing me and did a little dance. And a few hours before that, we were talking about like Sam Harris and free will versus fate. So all those guys are just amazing.
Well, it seems like a great atmosphere. I saw that picture on Twitter, the cruise shot. You guys were all full smiles, man. It looked like a good time. So, yeah, I guess it's got to be fun to sit in there with Jennifer Tilly and Doug Polk to talk poker. I would imagine it might be a tad intimidating, too, because they're big names in the game. Is it?
I don't actually think so. I kind of just remind myself a lot. They're just poker players. And I think that Doug is actually like the best version of the modern day poker player because he's a goofball. I think there was a time when we took poker a little bit too seriously, and I love that Doug is like a silly guy. He makes fun of himself in videos. He gets in beefs. He's always laughing. He's a very realistic guy, but at the same time is always having a blast with his actual profession.
Yeah, and he really commands a presence when he's at the table, in the commentary booth. He really seems to be trying to transcend poker and go more mainstream, and he's got the personality to do it. What do you think about Doug Polk and what he's done? I mean, he's been real good for the game. He calls it as he sees it.
Yes, very true. Just met Doug for the first time, actually, and he definitely is up for anything as far as poker goes and communicating with the fans. When he was guest hosting Poker Night in America, I was writing the teleprompter material, and I never met him, and I wasn't exactly sure how far I could go with some of his prompter reads. And I just went for it, wrote some really outlandish, crazy shit, and he just read it all verbatim and added his own touch. So he is all for the fun. And as far as transcending the game, it's funny. I play poker with a lot of guys that are older than me as well, like people in their 60s and 70s, and they always have their phones out, and they're watching Doug Polk videos talking about blockers. And that definitely used to never, ever, ever happen.
Yeah, talking about blockers at age 60.
Yeah, it's just... Doug is very good for the game. People are getting too good, though. I liked it more when everyone kind of sucked.
Well, that's interesting because poker really has changed. I mean, everyone is so good now. The edges are so much smaller, so it's getting tough out there. You really got to stay on your toes when you're trying to make a go of it.
Yeah, the game changes seemingly like from month to month. I mean, remember when 6-bets were like in style?
Right.
Like that was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it changes all the time. Doug Polk, by the way, tweeted out that this was going to be his last TV appearance playing poker for a while. Taking a little break, is he? Did you get any inside dish or scoop?
I don't buy it for a second, to be honest.
Really?
I think he'll be back on very soon.
Okay, inside tip there. Doug Polk is coming back very soon. All right, I checked out your YouTube channel, Feed the Geese, and you've got some highlights. Oh, by the way, before we talk about Party Poker Live, you had nothing but good things to say on the stream about the host venue, the Seminole Hard Rock. I've never been there. For my listeners, can you take us through what that casino is like? It sounds like it might be a good place to go and play some poker.
Yeah, absolutely. The venue itself is just obviously decorated like it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And you could take 5 steps to your left and there's, a George Harrison guitar, or 5 steps to your right and there's, a portrait of B.B. King. It's a really cool place if you appreciate, the history of rock and roll. And everything there is very clean and nice and spacious, and the bars are centrally located and have kind of a spherical layout, so it's very warm and welcoming. The food there is very good. I didn't get a chance to go outside too much, but from everything I've heard and from the pictures I think Jennifer Tilly was tweeting, she likes the pool. So if Jennifer likes your pool, then I assume you're good.
The pool probably likes Jennifer as well.
Yes.
All right, so you were in Hollywood, Florida for 3 days, but I mean, it was a busy time for you that week and a half. You were in Punta Cana before that?
Right, exactly. The entire crew from Poker Night in America was teaming up with Party Poker to help stream their Caribbean poker party, which was insane. they flew in not only their own ships, but they flew in their dealers. They flew in people from all over the world. So they were representing the entire globe there. That was nuts. It was incredibly hot, incredibly humid. We were broadcasting from a hallway with no ventilation behind the stage, and it was all inclusive. So the booze was flowing, the sweat was dripping, and we were all kind of just like on this crazy grind. I knew that it was going to be a crazy experience when I rolled up in a golf cart to the venue, and the first person I saw was Sam Trickett. And I had a great time. Ended up doing a lot of interviews. Jessica Dolly and I were co-commentating. We had a lot of good guests in there. I'll tell you one quick funny story. On the final day of the broadcast in Punta Cana, I woke up again with a terrible hangover because I had spent 4 or 5 hours drinking with Jonathan Little the night before. And as I was just trying to get my head straight and get things in order on the first hour of the stream, I remember feeling like, oh my God, like I might throw up on Jessica Dolly. And I had that cold sweat thing going, but I was getting through it, and I was trying not to dry heave. And as soon as I was trying to get my composure, Jess just turns to me and it's like, Jesse, can you please explain ICM again to the people out there in Twitch? And in that moment, I thought I was going to have a panic attack.
Yeah, no kidding.
Made it through.
Okay, on your YouTube channel, again, Feed the Geese, you've got some highlights from that final table with Mike Leah, Party Poker Live final table at Playground Poker in Montreal. Some crazy hands. That was a crazy final table.
Yeah, the Playground final table was really funny because that was a $2,200 buy-in. However, 70% of the field had won their way in through qualifiers and satellites. And so you had a nice mix of well-established pros and then guys that were in for $2. And in the end, I believe it was like Kevin Rivette, or however you pronounce his name, who won. But that final table had one amateur, Sebastien Labe, who cracked me up for 12 straight hours. And he got it all in, I want to say twice, in some of the weirdest spots ever. There's a hand with Mike Leah that's worth watching where he's got jacks and gets it in 3 ways versus ace king. And I want to say this amateur called with like 7-8 suited.
Yeah, 7-8 of clubs, and then the other hand, he had 10-4. He makes the straight against an opponent's higher straight, but then the river comes queen and they chop it, and that was like for a massive, massive pot.
Right. Patrick Serta, who is a well-established pro, did have the nuts. I think the two of them were the two biggest stacks at the table, and Labe had raised him with playing his 10 for a worse straight. And, of course, drawing to the chop for, who knows, like 300 big blinds. That changed the entire run out of that table because Serta obviously did not end up having that like 2x or 3x average stack at that point. But the funny part was that you can hear on the audio that Labe may have been a little bit nervous, and he said somebody gave him a piece of pill to relax, and he said, just take quarter, but I took the whole bar. And that, of course, leads me to believe it was like a Xanax bar. And so he may have taken 2 milligrams, the whole thing, and he was a little out there, a little spaced out, and I was dying in the booth laughing. Even after his massage ended, it seemed like he was getting a ghost massage. His shoulders were still moving, his eyes were rolling back into his head. It was a good time.
Oh, man. You never know what you're going to see at a poker game or in a casino. Some of the wildest things you'll ever see. You know, you don't see too many players like that making those kind of moves these days because you mentioned before that the players are so good. I'm wondering about your thoughts about the advent of Twitch poker, the various streaming sites, social media, and how everything relates to poker these days. I mean, times are a-changing, right? There's so much out there now for these players these days.
Yeah, there's an infinite amount of resources, especially with Twitch. You can log on at any hour of the day and catch many, many skilled players, and a lot of them are incredibly talented and play the stakes that beginners play at. So you can watch a really good player play a $10 tournament or a $55 tournament or whatever it is. And so you can go study, you can see that they're going to walk you through it in real time, and that didn't used to be a resource. And now that that is available, you see the whole game kind of evolving super fast and carrying over and then molding into something else. It's very tangible and malleable. you've got people developing new strategies like weekly, whether you're just like some new young kid coming up or you're someone like Jonathan Little that's put out 14 books and has a new theory that's going on. There's just so many resources and so many people to talk to poker about. And that's kind of where the best ideas come from, is when you get the best minds together to actually suss these things out and bounce ideas off each other.
Do you get a chance to play a lot of poker these days? I mean, on these stops, can you find time to grind it out, or are you just too busy with the broadcast?
Mostly too busy with the broadcast. I'm not a particularly good cash game player as it is. I want to say that the few times I have sat down, I've just donked off or dusted off a couple hundred here or there and then was just like done with it. I did used to grind pretty religiously online for a while.
I got to ask you one question. Alan Kessler made some news on Twitter this week talking about the multi-entry tournaments, that it favors the guys with a lot of money, that they can just go in and try to build a stack, and if they lose, no consequences for their bad play, they can just rebuy. Do you have any thoughts on that and the state of tournament poker these days?
Not particularly, just that Alan Kessler is the get off my lawn of poker. I mean, he's always going to be a curmudgeon about these things. Listen, it may favor people with more money, but as long as more money's getting in there, I think that's what everyone wants anyway.
And as long as it's posted too, I mean, you know the tournament structure, you can just decide not to play it if you want, if it doesn't fit your style.
Right, absolutely.
All right, man, so what's next? Any broadcasts coming up that we can look out for?
I don't actually think I have anything in the near future that I know about, but I think that the way that these things come together is that they might just string some stuff along come the new year, and hopefully I can continue doing this. I kind of just started out of nowhere back in September for the first time. I was just involved with Poker Night through my buddy Joe Stapleton, who I used to live with. So,
I meant to ask you about Stapes. I mean, is he as funny in real life in person as he is sometimes on those broadcasts?
Yeah, Joe is exactly the guy that he is on TV, only nicer. He's a softie, and most people just want to make the world a better place for themselves, but Joe's like actually the one person who's not like that, who really does care about people and has a soft spot in his heart. And he does crave the sound of laughter, preferably if it's induced by but he is a really, really good dude. Super generous.
Well, I tell you what, I love some of those segments he does. He is a funny guy, and I know he's got a quite a stand-up career as well. You are building connections with each broadcast, my friend. You've got a resume building, so I imagine we'll find you in the broadcast booth very, very soon. Jesse Abramowitz, our guest today, at Jesse Calls Poker on Twitter. Jesse, thanks so much, man. Nice talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.